I hope you're having a good day today. Thank you for joining me. We are going to be looking at the account of Jairus. Yesterday we looked at the account of the woman who touches the hem of the Lord's garment. Well, that account and the account of Jairus are interwoven. Today's hymn is the hymn Come Sinner Come.
While through his word he calls you, come, sinner, come. While we are praying for you, come, sinner, come. Now is the time to own him, come, sinner, come. Now is the time to know him, come, sinner, come.
Our passage is in Luke. Yesterday we looked at Mark's account. Let's look in Luke's today. Luke 8, verse 40. So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus. He was a ruler of the synagogue, and he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. But as he went, the multitudes thronged him. Then you have the account that we looked at yesterday, the woman who had the flow of blood. But as the Lord heals her, and we're going to refer to this as the Lord says, "Who touched me?" And then Peter and those with him said, "Master, the multitudes thronged about you." Now we come down, let's pick up in verse 49. While he was still speaking, okay, and as he says to the woman who had the flow, while he was still speaking to her, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher." But when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, "Do not be afraid, only believe, and she will be made well." When he came into the house, he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother of the girl. Now all wept and mourned for her, but he said, "Do not weep, she is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. But he put them all outside, took her by the hand, and called, saying, "Little girl, arise." Then her spirit returned. She arose immediately. He commanded that she be given something to eat, and her parents were astonished, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Okay. First thing I wanted to mention from the account, Jairus comes and fell down at the Lord's feet and begged him to come to his house. I wanted to think about the fact that there are different, I make this point with some regularity. Faith is not static. Faith is not binary. It's not 0 or 1. It's not on or off. That there's different levels of faith. And we see that even here. As the man says, and it's just interesting, the preconceptions that people have. The man says, "You need to come to my house." Right? You need to come. The woman says, "I need to touch the hem of his garment." There's the centurion who said, "You don't even have to come under my roof. I'm not worthy of you coming under my roof. You just give the word." And what's the Lord say? "I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Here Jairus is, as it says, a ruler of the synagogue. Well, he should have been much more faithful than the centurion, and yet the centurion was more faithful than he. The centurion understood authority. Jairus wants Jesus to come. We need to have faith, don't we? Sometimes folks will, well, I've got to see a sign. We need to have faith. And it's just interesting, and I understand all these individuals are on a journey, and what Jairus is going to learn is that all it takes is a word. Because the Lord says, "Don't be afraid, only believe and she'll be made well." And when he came to that house, right, we have all these things happening. And we think about the word, the power the Lord has. Anyway, you might consider it. And let's go ahead and think about our other points. Verse 49, as Jesus is speaking and someone comes and tells Jairus, "Your daughter is dead." The Lord is the answer to the greatest despair we have. or I should say the greatest despair. The greatest despair is unrepentant sin. That's the greatest despair. Think about it in the Old Testament. David cries for two sons. One son is Bathsheba's son, and David says, I can go to him, but he cannot come to me when that son dies. But when Absalom dies, he's absolutely inconsolable because Absalom was a wicked man. The greatest, the absolutely, the absolute greatest despair is unrepentant sin. But beyond that, we just think about death. And we think about how the world has no answers for it, but Jesus does. In our great despair, in our sorrow, we come to the Lord. The Lord has power. The Lord has power over death. It's one of the recurring things that the people have to learn. Mary and Martha, do you believe that you will see him again? Do you believe that he is the resurrection and the life? In our despair, we come to Jesus and we fall down at his feet. Back to our passage. They say, you do not trouble the teacher. Jesus is interruptible. It's one of the things Jairus and the others, as you think about it, would have to learn, or would have to learn and would come to learn, that it's okay to interrupt Jesus. See, he's on this journey to Jairus' house, and there's a multitude thronging about him, and the woman touches the hem of his garment, and Jesus stops that procession in its tracks. What do you think Jairus was thinking? Like, come on, we're going to my house. My daughter is dying. And yet the Lord stops the procession. He's interrupted by the woman with the flow of blood. Now the daughter is dead. Do you think this is also a test for Jairus? I think so. Why does the Lord stop? Why did the Lord not come when Lazarus was sick? Might consider it. There's a test. Don't trouble the teacher. Do not be afraid. Only believe, and she will be made well. I'll add one more extra point. Like I said, the two accounts are interwoven, Jairus and the woman with the flow of blood. The woman with the flow of blood, she'd had this condition for a long time, 12. There's so many different points to be made about this passage. I remember preaching on this account one time and made the point I never thought about. This woman had a flow of blood for 12 years. Jairus' daughter was 12 years old. This woman had been dying slowly for 12 years. Jairus' daughter had died suddenly. I'm starting to remember the other points I made from the sermon. The woman with the flow of blood, to be tactful about it, you have issues concerning women, and that you have someone who would have been barren and unable to have children. So you have a woman who could not. You have a woman who could not have a child. Then you have this girl who's becoming a woman. And the Lord restores them both. It's just an interesting account. But let's make another point. The multitude thronged about Jesus. Well, as the multitude's thronging about Jesus, Jairus is in that multitude. That woman with the flow of blood was unclean. Jesus turns around and says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples say, "What do you mean, who touched you?" Everybody's touching you. Everybody's touching you. And someone in that everyone was somebody unclean. And as everybody was touching Jesus, and the crowd is pressing, everybody would have been touching Jairus as well. You might think about contact. And whoever comes in contact with you, if someone else comes in contact with you, then that they've come in contact with the other person, and there's someone unclean there. And so you have someone unclean under the law, and you have the ruler of the synagogue, someone very, very clean in their own eyes. Might consider it just an interesting situation as we think about come, sinner, come. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.